How to meditate for longer periods of time. I wanted to make a practical video for you guys. I just came out with my video going over my experiences meditating 2 hours every day for an entire year. And with that video in mind, I wanted to make a video basically addressing how I was able to pull that off. In order to actually get into that type of rigor of practice, it requires that we basically employ mental gymnastics, mental ninjutsu, or aikido. Our minds are going to throw up defense mechanisms that are going to block us from wanting to sit down and practice, and there are very good reasons for this that I've talked about in other videos. But essentially, the mind doesn't want to sit down and study its own nature. Okay, it has a biological and societally driven conditioning pattern that prevents it from wanting to sit down and practice. And so when we do have, goals such as I want to meditate for an hour, I want to meditate for 2 hours, something like this, or even more, if we see the wisdom of this type of intensity of practice, then it's something that we want to pursue. More than likely, there's going to be a lot of resistance towards that pursuit. So in this video, what I want to do is address strategies that we can employ to actually get around these inherent defense mechanisms that our mind throws up when we try to practice for really intense periods. The first strategy is to just have a consistent meditation schedule. For myself personally, if I don't immediately meditate upon waking up, like very quickly, I'll probably wash my face, maybe make a cup of coffee, something like that. But if I'm not on it very quickly, upon waking, trying to meditate is going to be that much harder later on in the day. Now, if that does happen, like if I have some sort of crazy work schedule, which does actually pop up, that prevents me from meditating during my normal morning routine, I will have to be flexible. But for the most part, sticking to a consistent schedule, not even letting or allowing your mind to come up with excuses to not meditate, is extremely effective. And this is a strategy that isn't just limited to meditation. This is pretty much any sort of personal development habit that we're trying to employ or ingrain inside the mind. Not letting our minds even have the opportunity to talk ourselves out of it is a go-to strategy. So in the case of meditation, having a very set routine with your practice is going to allow you to meditate for longer periods of time. Don't even let your mind give you the opportunity to weasel itself out of practice. Just do it on instinct. Just do it without thinking. And over time, the more that you employ this consistent schedule, the easier it's going to become until it's just basically automatic. Another strategy is to learn more than one meditation technique. Now, this is a little bit strange. It might not make sense how this fits into the context of meditating for longer periods of time, but one of the fundamental reasons that it's challenging meditating is the lack of stimulus, the boredom factor. So when we do sit down to practice, immediately what we're going to recognize is God damn, this is boring. I'm not used to not doing this little activity, this little of an amount of activity, and this in and of itself is a challenging component of the practice. As we go and continue to meditate, gain experience, what we will come to find out is that actually our inner experience, our inner landscape is incredibly rich and vivid, very miraculous actually. But it's so subtle that it requires a sensitivity of attention that when we're starting out with practice, we don't really have that sensitivity to pick up on these fluctuations of our inner landscape, of our inner experience. And so when we're new to the practice, or even when we're just advanced but going through a period of purification or something like that, we're going to be confronted with boredom. We're going to be confronted with inactivity in our inner experience, in our inner system. And this can be very challenging. So how does this relate to learning more than one technique? Well, when we learn more than one technique, this gives us a sense of novelty to the practice, a sense of excitement, a sense of exploration. And so just having multiple techniques that you can just throw up in your tool belt is going to allow you to be more consistent. It's very likely that if we are only using one meditation technique, we will get burned out on it. And while on the one hand, there's definitely something to be said for just putting our heads down and grinding through, bringing equanimity to the boredom, bringing equanimity to our chosen technique, our chosen meditation system, there's also a wisdom, an advantage to having multiple techniques in our tool belt, so that when we do feel burnt out on a single technique, or we do feel like we have really been really just straight up getting bored with a technique, we can pivot and maneuver and actually deploy a new technique. And not only is this going to help with the consistency of meditating for longer periods, but this actually helps us learn more about meditation in general. It gives us a more holistic understanding of the practice. And as that holism grows, that's also going to help us be more consistent with the practice, meditate for longer periods of time, just because we have a greater understanding of what this practice is actually doing. We have a greater wisdom and basically conceptual framework to hold the practice due to employing multiple techniques. Now, this next strategy may feel like cheating a little bit, but I promise you it's not. This is something that I rely heavily on, actually, and have relied heavily on since I began meditation practice. And in fact, this strategy that I'm about to explain is how I was able to begin a rigorous meditation practice of basically 1 hour a day. If you're interested in the specific technique that I was using, you can check out my guided meditation. I will link it in the YouTube ether. But basically, it's the strategy of, instead of simply using a single technique for a single sit, you break your sits up into basically multiple micro sits. So if I'm going to sit down for 60 minutes, rather than just setting a timer for 60 minutes, I may set a timer for 20 minutes, and then another timer for 40 minutes, and then that final timer for 60 minutes. So you have the first 20 minutes of your sit, you are doing one technique. The next 20 minutes of your sit, you're doing a second technique, and then the final 20 minutes of your sit, you're doing a third technique. And again, this introduces the novelty factor. This is also why it's so important to have multiple techniques that you are familiar with, that you are comfortable with, that you resonate with in your tool belt, because then once you have those techniques, you can deploy them in different parts of your meditation practice. This definitely helps a couple things. One, not have the sits be as boring. And two, one of the big challenges with sitting for long periods of time is understanding how to handle the timing of it. Our experience of time starts to dilate. It can expand, it can contract. We can feel like we're sitting down for like way longer than 60 minutes if we've set a timer for 60 minutes, and sometimes 60 minutes goes by very quickly. When we have interval bells, basically interval timers going off during our sit, this can actually help just loosen up the emotional labor that it takes to just sit down and not know how much time is left. Fundamentally, you're still meditating, and you're still meditating for the same period of time, but of course, the way that you're doing it is vastly different than if you were to just set a timer for something like 30, 60, or 90 minutes straight without any interval bells. And so this is a very sort of sneaky way to get in more meditation without having to make the full commitment of, I have no idea how much time is left on my timer, what is going on, what is happening with my sit. This can introduce a lot of extraneous mental chatter, emotional body sensations, and mental imagery that is not necessary. And so sometimes, even though there is, again, something to be said for just gutting through and diving into a practice for the extended period of time without any interval bells, there's also a wisdom with breaking it up like this. And the last strategy that I'd like to introduce is just to be flexible with how you're sitting throughout your day. So for myself personally, my current sitting schedule is basically 90 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at lunch or evening. So I break my sits into 2 different sits. But there are instances where I do have to actually not follow that schedule. Again, maybe it's work, or maybe I get sick, or maybe some other random life event pops up, but I can't do my typical morning sit for the that extended period of time. What do? Do I not just, or do I just give up on the day? No, like, I am flexible. I'm able to pivot and adapt in the moment. So that is one strategy that I would definitely encourage, even though it does sort of break the consistency of building a daily sitting schedule. On the other hand, just getting your amount in whatever way is possible will still yield more results than if you were to just not sit. So if your objective, for example, is to meditate for an hour, but for whatever reason you were only able to do 30 minutes, whether that was due to life circumstance or maybe the meditation session was just particularly brutal and you couldn't finish the full 60 minutes, that doesn't mean just give up. That just means that, okay, later on in the day I'll find time. If I was supposed to sit for 60 minutes and I only did 30 in the morning, maybe I do 10 minutes at lunch, 10 minutes before dinner, and 10 minutes before bed, or something like that. There's a lot of opportunity throughout the day to practice smaller amounts of sitting. And just for the record, don't underestimate a 10-minute meditation session. Those are sometimes very powerful, very refreshing, very healing, very rejuvenating. Don't underestimate a 5-minute meditation session. And don't underestimate getting your minutes in whatever way possible throughout the day. So I hope this video was useful for you. I hope it gives you some ideas on how to sit for longer periods of time. This is incredibly important if you are interested in the long-term fruits of meditation, because again, life happens, we get in our own way, just stuff arises that prevents us from staying on track, but we understand, we have the wisdom that there's something to this whole rigorous meditation practice and we want to stay committed. We have to make sure that we have the mental flexibility, the mental agility to keep practicing even when we're not able to stay on track. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer all of them. If you have any personal questions or whatnot, you can email me. You can follow me on Instagram as well. That's all in the description. And other than that, I don't have anything. Actually, I do. If you like this content, please subscribe. If you like videos on meditation, spirituality, these sorts of topics, please subscribe. So that's all I got. Until next time.